Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. I hope everybody is having a great week. I am having a just fantastic week. I won't say why, but I will say that I've got my book, my recently published book is going to be out on Amazon in about a week, and over the next week I will be covering a series of articles that I've written on my site, thesleeperagent.com, and I will be going over those with you momentarily over the next week. And this is my personal channel now. It used to be the Garden of Great Work, but it's no longer the Garden of Great Work. And I will be covering my main topic, biological warfare, and that of course will reflect my recently published book called The Sleeper Agent: The Rise of Lyme Disease, Chronic Illness, and the Great Imitator Antigens of Biological Warfare. And what that book is a very in-depth, detailed history of the esoteric art of biological warfare. And especially noteworthy are what are termed incapacitating agents, which act through the mechanism of immunosuppression rather than a heavy immune response like you see in a lot of fatal diseases. This is the exact opposite. So essentially, and what this article I'm going to talk about is covering, are the two classes of biological agents, and they produce their respective spectrum of disease, being either acute disease, which is marked by heavy inflammation and often fatality, and you have the polar opposite of that, which is immunosuppression and slow chronic disease, where you do not see much inflammation, but it's extremely like there's an extreme level of suffering, although it's not as heavy as the acute disease, but it's constant, doesn't go away. So in many ways, I mean, I've been sick with the chronic Lyme disease for many years, and so you ask some of us and we might tell you, well, I'd rather have an acute disease that just lasts a week than to have something that is just constantly causing you suffering for many years. But that book specifically goes into the work and history and life work of Dr. Eric Traub, who of course has been brought up in other books like Lab 257 and Linda Hunt's book on Operation Paperclips, Secret Agenda it's called. But anyway, I have a site that I have recently published for that book, for my book, The Sleeper Agent, and of course it is located at www.thesleeperagent.com. So check that out. And I have about 12 blog posts up there right now, and I have actually printed all of them out because I'm going to be doing videos for each one. I have already done one for my blog post on Eric Traub. Now we're gonna just go one by one. They aren't very long articles, because basically what I'm trying to do is, I don't like giving too much away because I'm trying to sell the book. So it's kind of like little teasers, and then when you want to know more about it, well then go buy the book, please. I can assure you that the book, what's in that book, is highly worth the money you pay for it. $24.95 on Amazon, and it's like no other book on biological warfare. And it did have I had a foreword written by John Loftus, former military intelligence officer and a retired Justice Department federal prosecutor and Nazi hunter. And he wrote the book America's Nazi Secret, which used to be called The Belarus Secret. And he was the first one to bring out the Lyme disease connection to biological warfare. And that was in 1982. And when he did that, he said it was being spread by ticks. And that was before they had even confirmed that it was being spread by ticks. And I believe the following year they did confirm that. We're going to start out, and actually I had a preliminary chapter in the book called the 5 angles of biological warfare. Hold on a sec. I'll tell you what it's called. It was called The Art of Germ Weapons. The 5 angles of biological warfare. And this article, I've got that's a drawing I did of the leptospirochete. Causes leptospirosis. It's a spirochete that's transmitted through water. Nasty one. But this first article is specifically about the 2 classes of biological weapons. Those that kill and those that incapacitate. So in my book, I open it up with these 5 angles of biological warfare. I talk about those 2 kinds. Those that kill, you got like anthrax, that would be one, especially the inhalation form that causes pneumonia. That form is fatal, and then you got things like Ebola virus. That would be an example of a fatal disease. The Spanish influenza, well, it goes both ways with that one, but typically, like Ebola and anthrax are very good examples of of agents that cause that fatal disease. And then you have those that incapacitate, which are like Lyme disease, SARS coronavirus 2 would fall in that category, since it causes that immune tolerance outcome, which they have termed long COVID. Then you have a lot of the tick-borne diseases, like a lot of the rickettsial diseases. Rickettsia is a form of bacteria. Babesiosis. Malaria is another one. Tuberculosis. So these are marked by immunosuppression, those incapacitating ones. And my book specifically focuses mostly on those incapacitating agents. And here, I'll even read a little teeny part here that there's a number of diseases cause virtually no mortality, and the agents of these diseases are generally termed incapacitating. Some mortality might be caused in individuals with pre-existing illness or those suffering from malnutrition or radiation sickness. Q fever, chikungunya virus, and Venezuelan equine encephalitis are examples. And there was another quote that was actually from a congressional hearing in 1969. And they also talked in that hearing Within the next 5 to 10 years, it would probably be possible to make new infective microorganisms which could differ in certain important aspects from any known disease-causing organisms. Most important of these is that it might be refractory to the immunological and therapeutic processes upon which we depend to maintain our relative freedom from infectious disease. So when you damage the immune system and you take the immune system out or throw it into disarray, it causes a long, slow, drawn-out chronic disease. Now, a lot of people, and most people that I've told about this book, like, well, I don't understand it. How that makes no sense. How do you have a biological weapon that doesn't kill? And you know, takes many years to play out because you're not really understanding the context in which it's used. See, the thing about disease is there's something called HLA, which means different people respond to the same agent in different ways. It's like a variation of the immune system. Just like there are variants of viruses, there are variants of immune systems. And those fatal diseases are not, different people will have different responses, so it's not always, a hard, fast rule where it's just a fatal disease. Yeah, there are things like Ebola and anthrax that cause large numbers of fatalities, but there's no agent that acts the same way in every person. And also, when you use those highly fatal disease agents, it is very easy to spot them, and it's very easy for that reason to contain the outbreak quickly because the damage is so apparent. You're able to track it, you're able to, separate the sick from the healthy. Well, with these immunosuppressive, slow diseases that are very stealthy, it becomes impossible to separate the healthy from the sick, and it unravels so slowly that it almost goes undetected, and usually does. And another thing is, if it unravels slowly and stealthily, they can continue attacking, and over a number of years, the agent thrives exponentially in that ecosystem, and then it's just like the snowball effect. And they also found that those agents, you get a much, much higher infectivity rate when it's slowly proliferating through that population for a long time. Whereas those highly fatal and obvious diseases, like I said, are contained very quickly, so you don't get a big infection rate. And when you have agents that have lower virulence, they have a much higher infection rate. Because with those more fatal diseases, they burn out really quickly. Like Ebola, for example. It's it's highly pathogenic, it's highly transmissible, but it burns out really quickly. That's why the old biological warfare experts were talking about trying to combine Ebola with something like smallpox, which is a lot less fatal, but it will spread for a very long period of time and it doesn't burn out. So that's kind of the logic behind it. And also what has to be remembered is that if a country were to come up with something that is extremely fatal and causes an unbelievable amount of fatalities, they would have to be damn sure that they were completely successful and basically killed all their enemies so that they wouldn't be caught and then be crippled with sanctions and war crimes. Because no country wants to get caught. That's another thing. And there's a whole the first 2 chapters talk about how in World War I, Germany had sanctions levied against them for using chemical and biological warfare, and the forerunner to the United Nations, the League of Nations, put sanctions on Germany. They made it so that they couldn't have an army, they couldn't maintain a military, and there were economic sanctions. It was economically crippling. And so that actually was the pretext to the rise of the Third Reich, was that a lot of those Germans, see, the Soviet Union actually helped them to train their army, the Nazis, early on, and they cooperated with the Soviet Union. See, there was something called the Treaty of Versailles, which it prevented Germany, it was like the sanctions. It prevented Germany from building up an army or maintaining an army, like a national army. It would be like someone telling the United States the army has to be dissolved and the navy and all of those military branches. You can't have it. That's what happened to Germany in World War I. And so Adolf Hitler took control of the government, and they trained their armies in Russia because the Soviet Union gave them a place to train in return for chemical weapons technology. And so they had that cooperation. And then after that, I think it was 1933, Hitler dissolved it, brought everybody into Germany, and then that was the rise of the Third Reich. And that's also the reason that all of the biological warfare research will be hidden under benign research. So they will do biological warfare research, but they will say that it's benign research. They will say that it's medical research. They will say that it's scientific research, for treatments, preventing disease, things like that, because essentially offensive and defensive research is basically the same. The only thing that is different is the intention. So they started, and nobody wanted to end up like Germany. Nobody wanted to be the next Germany. And I'll tell you, Germany, it took them 92 years to finish off paying that debt, where they had all of those reparations for what happened. And they had those sanctions against them. It took them 92 years. Like, they've just finished paying for those sanctions. I think it was in 2012 for stuff that happened in World War I. And that is why nobody wants to end up like the next Germany. That's why you'll never see anybody calling a weapon on paper or in discussion. They don't make that mistake. So, people don't really understand the whole backdrop behind it. And that's what I go into in my book, The Sleeper Agent. I explain all that. I explain why everything is hidden under covers. And there was actually a Soviet biological warfare scientist. So there was something called the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention, which was a treaty. Before that, there was the 1925 Geneva Protocol or treaty, and that banned the use and stockpiling of biologic weapons. But in the new treaty, which was signed in 1972, called the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention, they modified it saying that you can do defensive research, but you can't do offensive research. And there was a guy named Igor V. Domaradsky, and he wrote a book called Bio-Warrior, the Soviet-Russian Biological War Machine. And what he said was that when that treaty was signed, the 1972 update, BTWC, it gave every country the pretext to actually expand offensive biological warfare research because they could get away with it by saying it was defensive research. And this is the quote. It says, with the signing of the BTWC, biological defense was no longer a priority. Under the cover of the treaty and unknown to the rest of the signatories, a greatly expanded and ambitious bioweapons program would rapidly take root in the USSR. And that's kind of the logic there. And so this actually gave all nations, it wasn't just them, because I'm sure the same thing happened for the United States. Everybody could get away with far more biological warfare research as long as they just said, hey, it's defensive research. We're just doing this. You know, we're raising the virulence of these viruses, which they call gain-of-function research, because we need to make it as deadly as we can under the pretext of protecting against it. So that's the whole rationale. And I will leave the link in the description box. You can... Oh, there was also, I'll read this other quote. There was, as it relates to the economic weapons or these incapacitating agents, I call them economic weapons because it greatly inhibits people's ability to work, and it puts a serious strain on the public health system, which is also an economic burden. But there was a Central Intelligence document called The Darker Bioweapons Future, and they were talking about these kind of incapacitating agents, or these binary agents where you have the first one is very low virulence and very, stealthy, and that when it's combined with its antibiotic or its so-called vaccine, it actually activates it. And I'll tell you what it's right here. According to the scientists convened, other classes of unconventional pathogens that may arise over the next decade and beyond include binary biological warfare agents that only become effective when two components are combined. A particularly insidious example would be a mild pathogen that, when combined with its antidote, becomes virulent. Designer biological warfare agents created to be antibiotic resistant or to evade an immune response. Weaponized gene therapy vectors that affect permanent change in the victim's genetic makeup, or a stealth virus which could lie dormant inside the victim for an extended period before being triggered. For example, one panelist cited the possibility of a stealth virus attack that could cripple a large portion of people in their 40s with severe arthritis, concealing its hostile origin and leaving a country with massive health and economic problems like you're seeing in America today. And of course, that had already been used in Traub's day, and he was kind of its pioneer. He did a lot of work on reactivating dormant viruses. So I'll leave it, like I said, I'll leave a link in the description box. Head on over to my site, check it out, check out the blog post, you can read it. It's only like 2 pages, not very long. And buy yourself a copy of the sleeper agent on my site or on Amazon. I'm probably only going to sell my book on my site until about December 13th when it comes out on Amazon, because it just doesn't make much sense to sell it on my site when Amazon offers free shipping. I can't do that, unfortunately, but I have copies just to kind of provide for the people that really want it sooner. It's only another week or so, or 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks. Then it will be released on Amazon on December 13th. So I will leave it there. Everybody, have yourself a nice week. And like I used to say, be yourself, build yourself, and I will see you on the other side.